with epilepsy being a brain disorder, this involves repeated spontaneous seizures of any type. About 180,000 people are diagnosed with epilepsy every year, and this affects about 2.5 million Americans. So essentially what makes up epilepsy is the seizures, and a seizure is a sudden uncontrollable event that happens when there is an unusual electrical activity in the brain. However, having a seizure doesn't mean that the person has epilepsy. Some have a seizure in a serious condition of dehydration or a high temperature.
Neurotransmission begins when an action potential travels down the axon of a presynaptic neuron. In order for an action potential to fire, it needs to reach a firing threshold of -60 MV, changing the resting potential of -65 MV. This happens when ions change their concentration due to sodium, potassium, and chloride exiting and entering the neuron. When an ion gets more positive, it is depolarized, and when it becomes more negative, it is hyperpolarized. In order to fire, it needs to be depolarized. Depolarization sends a tiny electrical charge called an action potential down its axons to the terminal buttons. This releases neurotransmitters into the synaptic cleft. Then there are a few things that can happen to the neurotransmitters. First, they can be accepted by the dendrites of the postsynaptic neuron through a process called receptor binding. This opens an ion channel in the postsynaptic neuron and influences it. Excitatory neurotransmitters cause the postsynaptic neuron to be more likely to fire, whereas inhibitory neurotransmitters cause the postsynaptic neuron to be less likely to fire. Another possibility is reuptake, which is when a neurotransmitter is recycled or taken back into the terminal button. Finally, a neurotransmitter can go through enzymatic degradation, which occurs when there are other enzymes in the synaptic cleft that can destroy the neurotransmitters.
Epilepsy is often called an electrical storm in the brain because the neurons are constantly firing, and that is a sudden electrical charge throughout the entirety of the brain and throughout the neurons. And that impedes the brain's ability to function, and that also causes the person who is having the seizure to not be able to move. So that is why, because the neurons are constantly firing during a seizure, the brain is in overload. So the neurotransmitters that are affected is GABA, because GABA is the neurotransmitter that helps prevent nerve cells from overfiring. So during a seizure, GABA is not functioning correctly, so that the neurons are just having an oversurge. Serotonin is also important for the well-being and associated behaviors. And so after epilepsy, people can get very depressed, and so that is an imbalance in serotonin. And ACH is a neurotransmitter that is important for memory. And during an epileptic seizure, people don't remember what is happening. So that is also a deficiency in ACH.
It's not the same. You're gonna tell me that I'm right. You know you're gonna come back down. Find yourself where you are again.